Hi, my name is Fred Meyer. I'm with Backyard Abundance, an educational nonprofit that helps people create and enjoy environmentally beneficial landscapes. And I am here with our Garden Guru program, and I want to give you a tour of the edible forest that I've created in my own residential landscape. Now, normally we would be at the Weatherby Edible Forest today, but this is our Garden Guru field trip. And so I'm showing you, instead of the edible forest there, I'm showing you what an edible forest might look like in an urban landscape. Now, I have designed this landscape. This particular landscape is about 8 years old, and I started creating the edible forest after staying in the house for a year. So I didn't start designing right away. I wanted to actually get a feel for the yard and observe it for a while before I started the design process. And once I got a feel for the yard and where the sun was shining and where the water was flowing and how I could manipulate the water so it created a self-watering landscape, that's when I started actually implementing the edible forest. And it started out from scratch. It was just bare turf grass and bare earth, so I brought in a lot of compost and a lot of mulch and created really good, healthy soil before I started the establishment process. And the first thing that went in were the fruit trees and berry bushes, and then I started planting herbs around all those and established all the pathways. And so what you're about to see is an edible forest that is in about its 6th or 7th year of growth, depending on when the plants got put in. And so now I'll give you a tour of that edible forest and just walk you through the entire forest and help you see just how wonderful and relaxing the space is. And everything that's around us has some sort of either medicinal value or edible value. So come on in and let's take a tour of the forest. Before we go deep into the edible forest, I want to give you a tour of the edge of the forest here. So I'll show you some of the plants that are growing and what was done to cultivate those plants. So let's head over here first. And this was one of the hardest beds that I've created. This is a blueberry bed, and it took a lot of soil remediation to get this soil acidic enough to grow blueberries, and they're still not doing all that great, but I am getting a good blueberry harvest out of them. And so this is my blueberry bed. It doesn't grow real well in Iowa. It takes a lot of sulfur in the spring to keep it going, but it's okay. It works pretty well. I get a decent amount of blueberries. It has a bunch of walking onions underneath it, and these walking onions are prolific throughout the edible forest. I don't really buy onions anymore. I just harvest these walking onions, and so they make a terrific understory for the blueberry plants. And then as we move back a little bit more, we've got oregano that has kind of taken over this area. This used to be a strawberry bed, and I got a lot of good strawberries from it, but as the edible forest grew and plants found niches, they just kind of filled in this area now. There's a comfrey plant back there, and some of my neighbors, Queen of the Prairie, moved in here. And so I don't do a lot of maintenance with the forest, or I should say a lot of management with the forest. I just kind of let the plants decide where they want to be. And if it's a good medicinal plant or a good plant that provides wildlife habitat, I tend to let it be. And so that's what I enjoy about forest gardening versus vegetable gardening. With vegetable gardening, it's really all about the maintenance and management and control of that space to maximize the food production. With this, I release a lot of the control to Mother Nature and let her be my guide to help me understand what she wants to do and what the landscape wants to do here. And so I let her guide more of the decisions than what I do in my own vegetable garden. So we've got oregano here. Oregano not only gives me a lifetime of spaghetti and pizza, but it also, you can see it's got these lovely flowers, and the bees just love this oregano. So they're all over it when it's in bloom, and it blooms for a good 4 to 6 weeks, and it's just beautiful. And so if we pan over here, you see this a couple large aronia berry bushes, and they will produce these lovely berries that are really astringent but very healthy. They'll produce lovely black berries in probably late summer, and can harvest those even almost through late October. And so those are coming in really well this year. So if we keep coming into the edge a little bit, we can see that there are many plants that are growing up around here. We've got the classic comfrey plant that is part of just about every food forest. And I love this plant because it's got a deep taproot, and it basically mines the soil for nutrients, brings them up to the surface in its leaves, and then the whole plant flops over, and those leaves die, and any plant that's around this comfrey plant will have access to those nutrients, because it's basically brought those nutrients up from the subsoil and put it on top of the soil. So like I've placed my comfrey plant strategically between my aronia berry and this lovely Montmorency cherry so that they could take advantage of these nutrients. So let's step into the forest now, and I think you'll see a big difference between what it feels like to be outside of the forest and actually inside of the forest. And this is another aspect of an edible forest that I really enjoy. With vegetable gardening, usually you're out in the sun because that's what our veggies really like, right? Is a very sunny environment. But we as humans don't really like to be out in the sun that well. And so when I garden inside of my edible forest, it is really like being in a forest. It feels like a nice, dense woodland. And so it's shady and nice and cool. The temperature in here has dropped by probably about 5 degrees. It's no longer sunny. You see, I'm not squinting into the sun anymore. So here we have, so the field is just different. And the other part of the field is I'm surrounded by foods that benefit me, like this lovely pear tree here. This is, I think it's 6th year of growth, and it's finally producing agave pears. Pears tend to take a long time before they start producing. Apples take probably about 3 or 4 years, and peaches produce sometime in the first 2 or 3 years. But pears take a long time. So this is its first year for a lot of growth. And underneath it, I've got a black currant growing here. So I tended to have trees fairly well spaced out. That was my plan, is to have the trees canopies barely touching to allow enough sunlight to come down and hit the lower story so that I could have an understory of shrubs and herbs that I could also harvest from. And for the most part that's worked, but if we step further into the forest here, we'll see that this peach tree above me, which isn't doing all that well, this peach tree was supposed to be a dwarf, but it has gotten to be a massive tree, and it's cast a whole bunch of shade over the edible forest garden, shade that I didn't expect it to cast. And so I have an understory of currants. Like this is a Red Lake currant that has produced gobs of currants for me. They're all gone right now. And then I've got a number of gooseberries over here. So this is a gooseberry over here, gooseberry here. But you can see, because there's such dense shade here, that these gooseberries aren't really producing that many berries anymore. But they are producing a few. And I think this peach tree will be fairly short-lived, or I will need to prune it back quite a bit to allow more sunlight to come into this understory. But right now it's fantastic. It's cool, it's a serene environment. I'm surrounded by critters that are flying around here. It's just a wonderful space to be in. If I had to do it over again, I didn't realize how serene this space would be. If I had to design it over again, rather than putting a bird bath here for butterflies and birds and things, I would probably put the bird bath and design something where I could just sit and hang out in this wonderful space. Let's talk a little bit more about establishment, because I'm hoping that you're inspired to start your own edible forest now. So this space is about 100 feet wide by about 50 feet deep. It's on the south side of my house, and I had the luxury of being able to design the house and site it on the lot to maximize the sunlight for the edible forest. You may not have that type of luxury. And so that's the first step, is deciding where you want your edible forest to be located and identifying where the water is flowing and where the sun is shining, because that's going to inform what types of plants you choose. And the other thing that I would encourage you to do is to start small. I think I mentioned this before, that when I initially started this edible forest, it was just bare ground and turf grass. And so I was really focused on soil development the first year and getting a few of the woody crops established, like my fruit trees and berry bushes. So that was my main focus in the first year, was just getting those things, the soil established, the water flowing in the right place from the downspouts on the house, and then just getting the woody species in place. So I started small and then built on those small successes. So from those islands around the fruit trees, I started planting more herbs like the oregano that you see here, the walking onions, the clovers, things like that. So I wanted to get those established first before I built on that, and just learned, I just wanted to learn from those small successes. And one of the things I learned was there's a lot of weed pressure around here. And so I needed to learn how to live with some of the weeds that were coming into the edible forest, specifically ones that were competing with ground covers that I would like to establish. So that's something that I learned right away. The other thing I learned quickly was there's a lot of deer pressure in this neighborhood. It sits between two valleys. And so I had to learn how to live with the deer and plant plants that they wouldn't really enjoy, and put up fencing around plants that they did enjoy so that the plants could get large enough and withstand some of that nibbling that they would do. So again, I encourage you, if you're going to start your own edible forest, start small, and if you think it's too small, I encourage you to start smaller, make it smaller. So you want to build on successes rather than starting large, finding out that something doesn't work, and then having to backtrack from there. That's not a lot of fun. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this tour of the edible forest, and the Garden Guru program has 3 other sites in the Iowa City community at 3 different parks. And so one is the Weatherby Edible Forest, of course. Then there's also Creekside Edible Forest, a new orchard that has just been established this year in 2020. And then the Downtown Edible Classroom in downtown Iowa City. So the Garden Guru program is at all 3 of those locations. So I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Iowa City Parks and Recreation Department. They've been a great partner for us. Green Iowa AmeriCorps has helped us maintain some of these gardens. And New Pioneer Food Co-op has provided snacks for events, past events when we were meeting in person. And of course, Collins Aerospace and Hills Bank and Green State Credit Union have all provided funding for the Garden Guru program. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I look forward to seeing you at our next video.